up? Welcome, everybody. If you're wondering why do I have a Weezer shirt on, is it because I'm some massive 90s Gen X man? No. Is it because I'm a super duper Weezer fan? Weezer was my first concert I ever attended. And so found this t-shirt, and I thought it would be funny to wear for the theme of our coming Gen X stream. Jamie and I are going to be doing our next stream together. It's been a little bit. It's been a minute. But our next stream is Gen X Altcom films. And you can guess what I mean by Altcom films. That's before sunrise, sunset, Richard Linklater, Reality Bites, there's a whole Mad Love. There's a whole spate of these, and they excellently capture, you could say, the Gen X mindset. Why does that matter? Well, we're going to be ruled by our new overlords. The boomer overlorddom its time is ticking. We will only be ruled by the boomer overlords, and I don't mean to be macabre. I don't mean to be dark. I'm being real, factual. If we're not going to be ruled over by the boomers much longer, we'll be ruled by the Gen Xers. Thus, we must know the mindset of our future overlords. How do they think? What are their cultural symbols? What are their archetypes? What's their language? What's the spirit of Gen X? We're going to get to that. Now, we did a couple streams leading up to this. We did Boomer to Gen X. Behold our MTV generational overlords. That was a fun stream. A lot of 90s culture going on there. And then I did another stream that didn't get very many views, oddly enough, which I thought was fun and should have got more views, where I took many of you to the mall. We went to Blockbuster together. We discussed events in the 90s, top 10 90s movies that I thought were fun. That was all in anticipation for our upcoming stream of the Gen X Altcoms. And I'm not even remembering all the movies at this moment. Mad Love, Reality Bites, Before Sunrise. But you're going to notice when... Empire Records. There's another one with Uma Thurman and Beautiful Girls. That's another relevant one, which had some odd themes in it. All of that will be discussed in our coming stream. It's going to be fun. So I'm wearing a 90s-ish shirt. No, it's pretty much not. I mean... Weezer was popular into the 2000s, but anyway, so that's why I'm wearing a Weezer shirt. So we're going to be talking about some fascinating stuff that I haven't talked about in many years tonight, because I was looking forward to getting back into this book, because as you guys know, when did we do this old video? Almost 5 years ago. June 2nd, 2019, which is almost 6 years, right? So, or 5 years, excuse me. So we're going to be playing a little bit of that to brush up on Alice in Wonderland. And then we're going to go deeper into part 2 through the looking glass and what Alice saw there. The occult, even perhaps geopolitical, societal, social revolution, all of that tonight in this deep dive that I think will surprise many of you. I think many of you probably don't know what all crazy stuff is going on in this novel. It's a pretty fascinating book. I have to admit, I'm pretty interested in it. Yes, I'm aware of all of the scandalous things surrounding the figure of Lewis Carroll. We'll mention that here in a second. Probably you've all heard of this. But it was believed that he might have been a creeper. I don't know that it was ever definitively established, but he did seem to prefer taking a lot of photos of kids. which is odd, to say the least. So that definitely puts him in a suspect camp. And beyond that, it turns out there actually were some esoteric interests that he had that few people have discussed. Few have actually gone into this. And those of us in the conspiracy world actually did talk about it many years ago. And it turns out a guy wrote a book. Where's this guy's book? Where's this guy's book? Jake Fiore. When did he write this? Let's see when this was. So this was only a couple years ago. So a couple years ago, a guy writes a book delving into what many of us in the conspiracy world already knew about and had discussed. I don't have this guy's book, but we're going to look at what the article says about his book, exploring Lewis Carroll's interest in the occult. We're also going to look at Isaac's overview. Our buddy Isaac Weishaupt wrote an article many years ago as well, I think in 2016. So already 8 years ago for Isaac's article. Even The Guardian discussed this, a couple years ago? Let's see when. 3 years ago, The Guardian discussed it as well. So this is becoming a little more well-known. But our buddy Scooter had a genius idea, which was to take the Matt Dillamonkey song and run it through an AI bot guy. And the AI bot guy collaborator who collaborated with us, he spit out this new masterpiece. You got to hear this. This made me laugh until I cried.
I tell a monkey, you climbed up in that tree. What you doing up there? Why you scared? Why you running from every debate? You ran from Andrew and from me. Now tell the monkey you like they female monkeys with their bananas between their trees, hanging down upside down from that's a smile. It's a smile. Now tell a monkey what you doing to me. Dilla monkey. Dilla monkey. What you doing to me? Dilla monkey. Dilla monkey.
Oh, sorry. I was feeling it, y'all. I was moved. I was moved by the spirit of my evolutionary impulses. Bro, I was just sitting there evolving. I'm listening to that song and I'm evolving. And I'm like, damn.
I tell a monkey, you climbed up in that tree. What you doing up there? Why you scared? Why you running from every...
Anyway, you get the idea. Everybody in the chat's like, damn, bro, maybe AI is all right. Exactly. Yeah, that was too funny not to share. Nothing to do with today's discussion, but man, that made me laugh so hard when he sent me that. By the way, you can follow me over here on X. My X is growing well, happy to say. We're almost up there, getting up into close to, we're 10,000 away from 75. If you don't follow me on X, there's the link. You can follow me there as well. All right, let's get into this. A little bit about Lewis, as we said, Lewis Carroll, author of both of the books that we're discussing tonight. And this is just a little bit of an overview which will help us to understand the themes present in his text, which is a very complex text, I have to say, and you don't think of it as that because it's a children's book, right? So we're like, oh, it's a children's book. It's just a bunch of nonsense. It's a bunch of nonsensical nonsense in Wonderland, ha ha ha, nursery rhymes. It's goofy, animals are talking. No. It's a lot more going on. To the extent that we're going to have to get into the occult stuff. It's crazy. Charles Ludwig Dodgson, born in 1832 to 1898, known as Lewis Carroll, English author, poet, mathematician. Keep that in mind. Mathematics will play an interesting key role in these texts. He's most known for Alice in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass, as well as his facility with wordplay. Wordplay is going to be an important element as well as we get into the madness. As you know, I titled this The Metaphysics, Madness, and what was the other M? I've already forgotten my M's. I don't even know what I titled this. Alice's Magic, Madness, and Metaphysics. There are logic puzzles. So he's going to deal with logic, fantasy, and it doesn't say this, but metaphysics. He also wrote the poem Jabberwocky and The Hunting of the Snark. They are classics in the genre of what's called nonsense genre, nonsense literature. Carroll came from a high church Anglican family and developed a long-standing relationship with Christ Church, Oxford, where he lived for most of his life as a scholar. Alice Liddell, the daughter of Henry Liddell, was the dean of Christ Church, and many identify her as the original inspiration for Alice in Alice in Wonderland. Now, here's the first fascinating element that apparently has recently come forward that many do not know. And that is that the Alice Liddell here, if you know your esoteric history, you might be thinking, hey, wait a minute. Liddell, Samuel Liddell Mathers of Golden Dawn fame? Yes. Turns out, according to Jake Fior, the author of the recent book about Carroll, Fior, who wrote on his take on Carroll's work, runs a shop called Alice Through the Looking Glass in London's West End, suggests that Carroll's fantastical stories come from a darker place. Fior explained to the Observer that Carroll had a definite interest in the esoteric, elaborating that he has a catalog of his possessions, including the books of his library, and in it he has a lot of books on the supernatural. Exploring Carroll's involvement with the occult, Fior found a host of interesting connections to the supernatural in Carroll's social circles as well. Many believe Carroll drew inspiration from Alice, from a member of the Liddell family. Yet another member of the Liddell family, Samuel Liddell Mathers, a relative of the young girl who inspired Alice, was one of the creators of the secret society known as the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. And the Golden Dawn, of course, produced figures such as Bram Stoker, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, and Aleister Crowley. At the turn of the 20th century, Golden Dawn was known for practicing metaphysics, ritual magic, paranormal activity, and so forth, and the authors that we mentioned. Beyond digging into the Golden Dawn, Fior also found famous use of the wordplay in a new light. Fior points out that Carroll utilizes acrostics, which come from Hebrew mysticism and the biblical, like how the biblical writers in the Old Testament sometimes utilize acrostics. While Carroll himself did not practice magic, his interests and interactions veered towards these puzzling, unexplainable things. Carroll was known to be fascinated in telepathy and even joined the Society for Psychical Research, the SPR, which included people like Carl Jung, and Freud. So you're going to start noticing, hey, wait a minute, there might be some overlaps between Jungian archetype philosophy and the Gnostic elements in Jung and what we see today in Alice. Yeah, the Golden Dawn is a little weird. What's the deal with Saint J? Oh, you talking about because of my halo, hey? Is that a Rihanna song? Yo, that's my nod to Rihanna. That's my little nod to Rihanna. Ella, Ella, under my umbrella, Ella, That's my word play. Yo, that's that word play for the day. Ella, By the way, we will be going into interesting elements of wordplay, idiocy. Oh, Beyonce? Now hold up. My umbrella. Beyonce. Halo's Beyonce. That's right. Umbrella. I know that's Rihanna. Don't try to check me on Umbrella. I happen to know my Rihanna songs. Excuse me. Excuse me. Talk to the lesbian glasses. Talk to the lesbian glasses, because I ain't hearing y'all right now. I ain't even hearing y'all right now. Jay could kill it at karaoke, bro. I have killed it at karaoke. You can ask the people who invited me to their karaoke parties. Like my buddy Mark. He said, quote, and I quote, Jay killed it at karaoke at our party, unquote. Under my umbrella, Anyway, I forgot to list down these examples that Jamie and I were talking about these in the car, and I meant to write them down. I forgot. Now I got to think of them. What were the? Okay, so we got a couple examples of stupid schizo word concept fallacies that you're all going to find very practical. You say, wait a minute, how could a schizo word concept fallacy be practical? Because you will notice patterns. When I was in the bathtub last night before our legendary laughable live stream last night, now I'm using alliteration. Legendary laughable live stream. As I was lollygagging in the bathtub, our legendary laughable live stream led to me thinking of interesting patterns. Pattern recognition, which, by the way, plays a key role in this novel. But what kind of pattern recognition I'm talking about? I noticed a pattern that the move that people make when they make word concept fallacies is the same move that people make in dialectical mistakes in philosophy. And it's the same move that schizophrenics make. Yes, you heard me right. And it's the same move that will be explored in this novel. And it's the same move that's made by idiot conspiracy theorists who are not total schizos, but have the reasoning skills and levels of total schizos. Jamie, come here for a second. When we were talking in the car, we gave the Jordan Maxwell example of birth, sun and sun. What was another one? I can't even remember them now. Oh, Solomon is the classic. Lion is a classic.
Birth certificate.
I got that down. Wasn't there one more good example? Anyway, I guess it was.
Bark?
Oh, well, that's in the novel. Yeah, I got that written down. Okay, thank you. You're excused. So no, we're not just talking about noticing bad patterns. I'm talking about noticing a pattern of the same move that's made in schizo, stream of consciousness, heretics and word concept fallacies, conspiracy theorist idiots, and the wordplay in this novel, and dialectical philosophy. And I was thinking about the example that Lenin, trying to remember Lenin's example. Lenin the revolutionary. Lenin has this example of like either ors. I can't remember that one. Anyway, you'll see the point when we get to it in a minute. So right now we're talking about the occult stuff. So keep that in mind. Maybe I'll even break out the whiteboard if you're good. Anyway, so this book is called through a looking glass darkly. And that's, of course, a reference to St. Paul in the Corinthians, where he says, we see through a glass darkly. In this world, we see not John Lennon, bro. Not John Lennon. Although John Lennon does play into this today, mate. We will see, actually, John Lennon does play into today's discussion, because as I was reading through this, Alice's exchange with the walrus, I said, wait a minute, this sounds like the Beatles. And it turns out, John Lennon wrote that song on Sgt. Pepper's from that chapter. I'm like, oh, he's talking about Alice in Wonderland. I never knew that until now. Anyway, but through a glass darkly, in the text, Paul's talking about that in this life, we don't really see everything clearly, whether the spiritual realities going on around us, what the ultimate purpose of evil events are, and also we don't see fully what heaven will be like in this life. Hence, we see through a glass darkly. And thus the title of this guy's book, Playing On Through the Looking Glass. And I think there's a section in the first one where Alice looks through a looking glass, too. But anyway, it's been 5 years since I read the other one. I'm the walrus, mate. I'm the walrus. They want to depopulate us all. They're going to kill us, mate. So, there is that connection. So we can establish then there is this occult element here. How deep into this, it's unclear. We don't know exactly how far Carroll had studied this stuff. We don't know that he was absolutely in the Golden Dawn, but he's definitely hanging out with and talking to the Golden Dawn people. By the way, as you guys know, also Charles Williams of the Inklings was also in the Golden Dawn. So you will see some interesting patterns, because when we talk about the Neoplatonic elements, which apparently Lewis Carroll did have a fascination with Neoplatonism, which makes sense because of his mathematical interests. So people that have this bent towards mathematics often find Neoplatonism appealing, because Neoplatonism gives a very high regard to mathematics, reality being in some sense fundamentally math, to Pythagorean tradition. And the Pythagorean tradition of mystical numbers, mystical mathematics, influences the Neoplatonists for sure. So this is over at the Guardian. There's another treatment, and let's see what the Guardian says about this Jake Fuhr guy. He repeats his statement about the esoteric stuff. I just want to see if there's any other elements in this that weren't in the other article. So this is talking about the artwork by Tennille. I do like the artwork, by the way. It's pretty awesome. This is talking about, it's all the same stuff. So basically, the first article was some kind of sus website, and all the same information is in the Guardian article. So if you are some sort of a idiot who thinks that the Guardian is like more trustworthy than other websites, there you go. So let's go back to his biography a little bit, and then we'll go to Isaac's article, and then we'll get into the first one, and then I will give my analysis of the second one. This is a half and half, by the way, if you want to watch the full breakdown. The rest of this is, I mean, it's a full novel. I mean, it's not long, but it's a 200-page book, right? So it's enough for a part one and a part two. So Carroll, as we said, is interested in Anglican theology, and this, I think, would suggest the predetermination stuff. So there's a very strong predestinarian influence in the novel, and most people don't know that either. And in the world of Anglicanism, there's always been a kind of an off and on love-hate relationship with Calvinism, and not all Anglicans have been Calvinists or Augustinians in a strict sense, but many of them have been. So, and that doesn't really apply to either low church or high church. You can have Calvinist-minded, Augustinian-minded high church Anglicans, and Calvinist, Augustinian-minded low church Anglicans as well. So, as a high church Anglican, he apparently was influenced by this. And the other element is the mathematics. So the mathematical depth that he got into also led him, I think, to believe in a form of kind of determinism, because in the book we have the idea that Alice's choices and her steps on the matrix, so to speak, of the checkerboard or the chessboard that she steps onto, and all of Wonderland is laid out like a chessboard. All of the areas of Wonderland are squares on a giant chessboard. And so game theory plays into this, because part of the point of the book is Alice a pawn? The queen actually refers to her as a pawn. Or is she in some way self-actualized with free will? And this notion of self-actualization comes into play too, because he's in the circles with Carl Jung. I don't know if he had interaction with Carl Jung, but he's a member of the Society for Psychical Research like Carl Jung. And I think there's definitely some esoteric, occult, and Gnostic, Hermetic elements in this. Apparently he was interested in not just Golden Dawn philosophy, but Rosicrucian thought and Neoplatonism. Now, that's also not surprising, because many of the Anglican so-called ministers at this time, and going back to the 1700s, shocker, many of them were interested in alchemy, Hermeticism, and the occult. Many of them were also Freemasons. Many of them were also British intelligence. Shocker, right? But yes. Thank you for that, Slowboy. Appreciate you guys supporting the stream there in the chat. If you want to support the stream, you can do so by super chats, and super chats are done over here via Streamlabs. Very easy. You just click that link in the chat right there at any point, and periodically through the discussion I'll answer the questions. Now it says so he was ordained. We're going to skip some of this. We'll skip past some of this. In the Church of England, he becomes a deacon. He's never ordained to a priest. He was into John Henry Newman. As you know, he would become Cardinal Newman. The Tractarian movement of high church Anglicans moved more and more towards Roman Catholicism, and eventually Newman converts, and he writes his famous book, which influences quite a few people to also convert. It's even still cited amongst the trad cats and the Novus Ordo people that want to try to convert Protestants and Anglicans. They'll often give out Cardinal Newman's book. I remember reading Newman's books back in the day when I was Protestant looking into Catholicism, but apparently he also was influenced by this. So he had read allegorical treatments when he was younger, like Pilgrim's Progress, and that's going to influence his production, I would assume, of Alice, right? Went to Oxford. Did he major in math or theology? I'm not sure. So let's see. He was his father was friends with the famous Anglican canon lawyer Edward Pusey. Pusey was a famous high church Anglican. Now, this is the reason we're going into this is that, and I don't know if this is going to talk about it, but he had a couple health issues and developed a stammer and a bad cough at some point. And the dodo in the first part is a caricature of himself, it says. But this doesn't mention, and this is going to be interesting for his social connections too, for the geopolitical stuff. But, by the way, wasn't George MacDonald also, I think, in the Golden Dawn? We'll see here in a second. But my book that I have has a scholarly introduction. Of course, it's always good, I think, to get some of these texts that are not just the pure text, but kind of the scholarly text, because they'll give you the background and introduction that talks about him having multiple personality disorder. And I had not encountered that before. However, this does make sense, though, when we remember that Alice has multiple personalities. If you don't remember, in the first novel, there's a point where she gets to Wonderland and she starts interacting with herself, and she has multiple selves, and they're dialoguing about, well, what is it to be a self? By the way, I forgot to mention, They Might Be Giants also have many references to this novel, both of these, because They Might Be Giants have that song, The Self Called Nowhere. Pretty sure that is a reference to Alice in Wonderland. And there was something else came up in Through the Looking Glass that was a They Might Be Giants reference, but I forgot what it was. Anyway, The Matrix as well. Obviously, probably The Matrix is the most famous play on Alice in Wonderland with the White Rabbit. And, oh, Neo, can he follow the White Rabbit? Whoa, dude. Whoa. So we'll look at that here in a second, but this does not, as far as I can tell, mention that he apparently has split personality. Now, it wasn't diagnosed yet, but presumably, if he's in the circles of Jung and Freud, maybe they noticed this. I'm not sure, but that might be why Alice has alters and multiple personalities in the first novel. Let's see if there's anything on this otherwise. I forgot to look otherwise because it came up in this article and I was surprised. Many people thought, oh, he was on drugs when he did this. Here's an article on it. I don't know what website this is. Somebody's paper. Lewis Carroll's dual personality shown in Looking Glass. Yeah, but it's not just in Looking Glass, because it comes up in the first one where she's debating with herself as to what a self is. Y'all know that They Might Be Giants song, Self Called Nowhere. Interesting. So now it may not be the case. It may be a theory. Let me see if I can find where the introductory essay was saying that. No, now I forgot where it's. I know I read it. It's in here. Maybe it's in the introduction to the first part. Yeah. Okay. There's a long essay here at the beginning. Anyway, I read it somewhere. I promise you. So let's see if George MacDonald also was a Golden Dawn person. I'm pretty sure he was. Let's just skip past this. Maybe not. Golden Dawn. Yes. No. Charles Williams is Golden Dawn. George MacDonald wrote The Golden Key. Okay, maybe George MacDonald was an Inkling, is that right? But not Golden Dawn. Is that right? Scottish minister. Father of the Inklings dedicated the legacy of bolting into Christianity to George MacDonald. Okay, so maybe George MacDonald wasn't a Golden Dawn guy, but he was friends with. Anyway, the reason we wanted to go to this part of his connections was that in the interim between his publishing writings, Dodgson began to move in the pre-Raphaelite social circle. He first met John Ruskin. Interesting. Now, if you know your Quigley and your Milner, Rhodes, Rothschild circles, you know that John Ruskin is a key player in this as one of the early formulators of the philosophy of a world federation that would be used by the Milner circles. So the Milner circles didn't just come up with this out of nowhere. They were very influenced by and thought that this guy was kind of one of their brains. Philosopher, art historian, art critic, polymath. He wrote on geology, architecture, myth, ornithology, literature, education, botany. So a sort of a Renaissance type of guy. He also seemed to have a problem with spanking his monkey, literally. He had some sort of weird compulsive problem with this. I remember reading. But this isn't even talking about the fact that he wrote this thing about World Federation. And so he influenced the Fabians to come up with this. All right, where is it? This is taking forever. So let me show you the book I'm talking about. John Ruskin, World Government or World Federation. Prophet of the Human-Built World, exactly. Rhodes and Ruskin. Yep, here you go. Cecil Rhodes, John Ruskin, and the Worldview Goal of a Eurocentric World Government. 2015, Brandon Howes. So yeah, there you go. The British Empire would be this seed form of creating eventually the European Union and then a world union. And that's, of course, what happened. So if you go deep into the Quigley, Rothschild, Rhodes stuff, you'll come across John Ruskin. So back to... So we know that he's in these circles, right? So he's hanging out with these pretty high-level people. He's close to a lot of high-level elites. He has these health problems he appears to have, although it wasn't really diagnosed at the time. It appears to be MPD, DID. His literature has often been given a Freudian interpretation in that Alice's descent is a descent into the dark world of the subconscious. That's correct. It is partly that. The overwhelming commercial success of the books spread around the world. He was inundated with fan mail, sometimes unwanted attention. Supposedly Queen Victoria herself enjoyed the books, that she commanded that he dedicate his next book to her. He denied this story and commented that it's false. Now, I think that's relevant, though, because, not that the story is true, but I actually think he is criticizing the nobility system to a degree. I think that's what Humpty Dumpty represents. So, and we'll see that here in a minute where I come up with that. But all right, let's go over to Isaac's text now that we've gotten the basics of his background. And by the way, I forgot to mention that. So here, this is well known, right? This is just mainline Israeli news. Gematria of the alphabet, acrostic of Proverbs. Now, before people lose their mind and spur out, okay, there is an element of biblical gematria. It's not what these idiots on the internet do, where they go schizo and think that everything is numbers, and you can cross-reference everything into these random gematria. How you're going to win on a betting on the Cubs game, and when the Illuminati is going to blow up the planet. Okay, that's all stupid shit, right? That's dumb. But both Hebrew and Greek in the ancient world, because they didn't have the separate Arabic numeral system like we do of the Arabic numeral 1, 2, 3, right? They utilize their letters as also numbers. Okay, so gematria is not some massive mysterious thing. If you look at when John is writing in the Apocalypse and he writes 666, if you read Ken Gentry's book Before Jerusalem Fell, or if you read Days of Vengeance by David Chilton, it's very obvious that John is also writing in a code that other readers would be able to recognize, that the Roman pagans who would see his letter from Patmos wouldn't understand. So if John wanted to say that Nero is a beast, is an antichrist, and I think that 666 is talking about Nero, he's going to write it in a code. And one way that we know that that is true is that in the book of Revelation, there are actual textual variants. One of the textual variant has 616, and the other textual variants say 666. And the interesting thing is that when you put Nero's name into Gematria, this is a legitimate use of Gematria, it still, whether it's 616 or whether it's 666, it still comes out to Neron Kusar, NRN QSR, Nero Caesar. Okay, so that's legit Gematria. But also, the Hebrew versions of some of the Psalms and Proverbs, and I think Nahum, let me see, I listed some of these, are acrostic poems. So, let me see. Where did I write this down? I don't know where I wrote it down. I don't see it on my notes. But I can remember where they were. Psalm 119, Psalm 23 or 24 is an acrostic. Sections of Proverbs, Nahum, Lamentations is an acrostic. And Nahum 1 or 2 is an acrostic. So what is this? Well, the Proverbs 31 example is in the Hebrew 777 words. And it says that Proverbs 31, 10 to 13 is one of the 13 alphabetical acrostic poems in the Bible. So in the Hebrew Bible, there's 13 of these. Each line begins with a successive letter in the Hebrew alphabet. This is called the Eshet Hayil, or the woman of valor. So in other words, the famous Proverbs 31 woman that everybody's heard of, right? This is actually a Hebrew acrostic poem, and it utilizes the alphabet. Now, this woman, in her article, she says, if you calculate this, every first word of each verse, as well as the name of God, is 30. In verse 30, the calculation of 86 characters corresponds with 86 in the value of the name of Elohim. And again, this is not like outlandish, crazy stuff, okay? Absolutely makes perfect sense that when the Hebrew texts were being written and compiled, they would be putting these kinds of symbols into it. So, and this doesn't mean that Kabbalism is true. It doesn't mean that, it just means that the Hebrew text is inspired. The Bible's inspired, okay? And yes, I mean, ultimately we would say the Septuagint, but before there was a Septuagint, there was some proto-Hebrew text. And not every Hebrew text is necessarily bad. We don't necessarily hate the Masoretic text. Matthew's Gospel cites what would become what was the proto-Masoretic text. So it's not that big of a deal. And it's not even a big deal that there are elements of these interesting symbolic things. Now, this is not Bible code crap. You can't put codes into a program that tells you Bible code. That's a bunch of scam nonsense. It's not a magical device to predict the future, is what I'm saying. But there are these fascinating symbolisms, or symbolic correspondences, poems, numbers, right? That does exist in the text. So hopefully we can be level-headed about this, because as soon as people hear this, they go nuts with it, and you've got these idiots that Jim Bob's always debating with. Okay, so Kabbalism is not identical to this. You understand? Kabbalists do this stuff, but this is not the same thing as Kabbalism. Okay, so if you're an Orthodox Christian, you've inherited these texts, and whether they're in the Hebrew or the Greek, both utilize the principle of Gematria. The Greeks did this too, because the Greeks didn't have Arabic numerals. Alpha, beta, gamma, 1, 2, 3, delta, 4. That's how they did their numbering. That's all it is. It's not a superstitious device for predicting the future or getting magical knowledge, even though some people use it for that. Anyway, so she's talking about some other of these examples. She says Proverbs 31 declares itself to be the Proverbs of King Lemuel, who says that it was an oracle that was taught to him by his mother, right? So it's the Proverbs 31 woman. No other mention is made of him, however, in the Tanakh, but Jewish legend identifies him as another name for Solomon, and so he was getting this advice from Bathsheba, What is the Genesis order? It is the letter ordering of Genesis 1 and 2. So Bet is 1, Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Shin, Dalet, right? This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And until Resh, which is 20. Numbered this way, the alphabet has a sum total of 217. That's 7 times 31, which is a key number to the 7 palaces. I'm assuming that's talking about the sections of Proverbs where he's talking about wisdom and her pillars, the pillars of wisdom and whatnot. Gematria is mainly used for biblical Gematria, and it's a reverse version of biblical Gematria. And so anyway, she talks about how there's a parallel between the ordering of Genesis 1 and 2 and what is in Proverbs. So now the woman of Proverbs 31 in the literal sense is a literal smart woman. In our view, it would also be the church, right? The church, allegorically speaking, is the true Proverbs 31 woman. And so she would be an image, of course, of both the Theotokos and the church. So it's not surprising that if this parallel that this woman is theorizing, it's not surprising that there would be a parallel between the creation order in Genesis 1, which is where Eve comes from, and the new creation of the new Eve, Mary, who would be the ultimate Proverbs 31 woman. Anyway, so I know we're not here to talk about all that stuff, but I'm just pointing out that this is not that far-fetched. This is one example of symbolic correspondences in the Hebrew Bible that would have influenced and did influence a bunch of the literary circles that he's in. And I can, again, that's not even in question. Because if you remember, we covered this in the C.S. Lewis Space Trilogy. We did a whole deep dive into how J.R.R. Tolkien is the hero of the Space Trilogy. So Professor Ransom, right, that's Tolkien in code in Lewis's book. And in the first Space Trilogy, at the end, there's a letter from the professor, who's Tolkien, and he explains that he was reading medieval texts and he came across this principle of Neoplatonism that would undergird the philosophy here. So again, the Inklings were influenced by Neoplatonism. Lewis Carroll is influenced by Neoplatonism. And Neoplatonism has a lot of parallels with what we're talking about here with Hebrew acrostic mysticism and what would later become quote, Kabbalism. Now, let's talk about that Kabbalistic side of it, because the Hermetic Order of Golden Dawn was influenced by Kabbalism, but what they sought to do was to, as the Rosicrucians prior to them had sought to do, was to remove Kabbalism from anything to do with Hebrew stuff. Now, I'm not saying that Hebrew Kabbalism is good or correct, or that the Golden Dawn's Hebrew Kabbalism is good or correct. And I'm going to surprise you here, but guess what? Kabbalism is ultimately just a form of Gnosticism and Neoplatonism. So a lot of people are mystified. Oh, whoa, Kabbalism. Oh, whoa. Right? No, it's just Gnosticism and Neoplatonism. If you read the premier scholar of this, Gershom Scholem, I've read several of his books, he points out that they're just borrowing from ancient Gnostic systems and from Neoplatonism. And there's not one Kabbalah, there's many of them. So between different rabbis, there's different Kabbalistic systems. There's Nachmanides, there's Isaac Luria, right? There's Kosaba and all these different characters. Some of these characters are fictional characters. Anyway, each philosopher, mystic person might even make up his own Kabbalistic system. And so for these people, and particularly with say Crowley, when they borrowed from Kabbalism, what they wanted to do was create their own pagan version of Kabbalah. And I think Crowley even says something like that somewhere. If you read, for example, Crowley's in the Circles of the Golden Dawn with, I think, Israel Regardie, right? Regardie writes a whole book where he's like, I'm going to do the true, pure Kabbalah, right? So basically, they're all just trying to come up with their own mystical, magical systems. They're all tweaking it. they're doing cafeteria style stuff, but really it's borrowing from the structure of Neoplatonism. That's why there's parallels, by the way, between the Kabbalistic tree and the Sephirot and the structure of Neoplatonism. And it's not one-to-one, because none of this stuff is like one-to-one. It's all just kind of evolving systems, but the underlying structure is stuff that we find in Pythagoras, the Orphic Mysteries, Plato, Neoplatonism, Plotinus, and the Porphyrian tree. So hopefully, by the way, what I'm trying to do in part of this part is to demystify this stuff. People are mystical. Oh, it's mystified. It's not even that mystical. I'm sorry. Hate to break it to you. It's not that mystical. So let's look at one example. So just look at the Porphyrian tree. Whoa, the Porphyrian tree, it's like the no. And medieval Western thinkers use the same types of structures. Boethius. Whoa, Boethius, Orthodox saint, he's a Kabbalist. Whoa. And then you get Roman Catholic Western-minded people like Raymond Lull uses the same type of structure. Whoa, Catholic. They're just using pre-existing structures, okay? And the structures are borrowed also from Aristotle. It's the categories. So different philosophers are coming up with ways to try to structure reality. So notice, as we point out in the Porphyrian tree, Porphyry suggests in his tree, in his introduction to isagogy, that he's using Aristotle's categories. Aristotle's categories of classification were later adopted into tree-like diagrams with two-way divisions, which indicate genus and species, or genus and differentia. This was a logical process that continues until you get down to the lowest species. Okay, so you can see that this structure is utilized by all kinds of philosophers throughout the ancient and medieval world. And there's nothing necessarily inherently satanic about the structure. It's just Aristotle's categories. Okay? And these continue to be taught and used up into the Middle Ages in all kinds of medieval metaphysics textbooks and logic textbooks and even science textbooks. Because look, notice, what is this? Oh, well, the Porphyrian tree here just happens to be Aristotle's genus, right? Substance, species, all the way down. So it's just, these are, okay? Because they're used throughout the ancient world. So if a Satanist uses this, it doesn't make it a satanic structure. That's dumb. So, there you go. Whoa, demystified. Now, so the Hermetic Order of Golden Dawn, as we said, was an occult order that began in the late 19th and 20th century, known as a magical order. Active in Great Britain, focus its practices on theurgy and spiritual development. Hey, Jamie? Jamie? Can you stop with that noise? Thanks. The contemporary traditions such as Wicca and Thelema are inspired by Golden Dawn. Now, Thelema is where you'll get, this is more of a focused Crowleyan thing, right? And it springs out of Golden Dawn. So Crowley's in the Golden Dawn for a while. He doesn't stay with the Golden Dawn because one thing you'll notice is that a lot of these people, the so-called magic people, what they do is they learn the structures, the tricks, the grades, the levels, and they go and create their own cult. And as we pointed out many times, even to demystify Crowleyan stuff, the people who leave Crowleyanism, it's just a grad school for creating your own cult. Because what does Gerald Gardner do when he goes to the ranks of Crowley's thing? Oh, he starts Wicca. What does L. Ron Hubbard do when he goes to the the ranks of Crowley's thing? Oh, he starts his cult, Dianetics, in Scientology. So, presumably, the Golden Dawn was an earlier version of this. Go through the grades, learn to create your own cult. And by the way, the Hierophant of the cult might also want access to your booty hole. That also tends to be one of the key elements of having a ritual magic cult. So, commonly known as the Golden Dawn, secret society devoted to the study of, or we already talked about that, Thelema as an offshoot, Wicca as an offshoot. The three founders were William Robert Woodman, William Wynne Westcott, and Samuel Liddell Mathers. Mathers was they were all Freemasons and in the Society of the Rosicrucians. Now that's interesting because, again, remember, Samuel Liddell Mathers, is the relative of Alice Liddell, who is the basis for Alice. The Golden Dawn system is based on a hierarchy of initiation borrowed from Masonic lodges. So you notice that, hey, wait a minute. Seems like the cults and the magical orders, like they seem to be just doing the same thing as the group that they sprang out of. Exactly. These are copy-paste scams. The Golden Dawn doesn't have access to ancient, unknown mystical powers. They're just borrowing from the previous system of Rosicrucianism and Masonry. The Golden Dawn was the first of the three orders, although they were often collectively referred to as Golden Dawn. The first order taught esoteric philosophy based on what? Hermetic Kabbalah. Is that Jewish Kabbalah? No, this is a Hermetic version of Jewish Kabbalah. And what is that? Well, it comes out of, again, Rosicrucianism. And where do we get Rosicrucianism? Well, if you read Dame Frances Yates' book, The Rosicrucian Enlightenment, which I read 15 years ago, it's a great book covering this period. John Dee, figures like Christian Rosencrantz, some of the second generation Lutherans. So not necessarily Luther, although there is evidence that Luther was influenced by Rosicrucianism, or the Theologia Germanica, which is a Neoplatonic text. It's more definitive that the next generation of Lutherans, like Johann Andre, and then presumably Andre or somebody like him, wrote the Rosicrucian Manifesto of Christian Rosencrantz. So it was very popular at this time, right, to have these documents written by a made-up figure, right? Christian Rosencrantz. Okay, well, nobody knows who that is. And if I recall, it's been 15 years since I read it, but Yates thinks it was maybe Johann Andre, I think. Something like that. Anyway. But people say, well, why was the Luther rose? And if you notice, actually it is a Rosicrucian symbol. Why is Martin Luther's symbol a Rosicrucian symbol? Well, it became the seal due to John Frederick of Saxony. And some of these nobility and these dukes and these people like this, these principiates, they're mentioned in Yates's book as being into Hermeticism. So I don't think that Luther himself was a Rosicrucian per se and that he chose this symbol. I think it's the other people that chose this who were into Rosicrucianism, but the symbol is a Rosicrucian symbol. If you didn't know that. So that's my view of it. And Dame Frances Yates' book is not a conspiracy book, for those that are wondering, by the way. So let's see. Let me show you the Rosicrucian rose. So it's very similar, and there's variations on it. So in the old Rose Cross texts, it looks like this. I think this is a later on kind of weird occult version of it. But you get all these variations. And a lot of these older alchemical texts, All right, you'll get these crosses and these images like this here. So the Brotherhood of the Rosy Cross, they use this. Now, what were the Rosicrucians? What was their philosophy? Well, they were just kind of the Neoplatonic Hermeticists of the 1500s. Okay, so that's not that much of a mystery. They're not. They were into, again, Neoplatonism, but they were also seemingly into scientism. And Dame Frances Yates's book also goes into that, because she theorizes that actually the Enlightenment, the philosophy of the Enlightenment, was itself in many ways a Rosicrucian esoteric philosophy. The exoteric philosophy of the Enlightenment, the philosophes, all these people that you think of as Enlightenment and post-Enlightenment thinkers, the empiricists, Hume, Locke, Berkeley, Kant, all these figures might have also had Hermetic interest. And I think that's confirmed with Descartes. I think it's pretty clear that Descartes was involved in perhaps some Rosicrucian circles as well, if I remember. I haven't read on this in 15 years. But look, if you want to go deep into this, I highly recommend the Dame Frances Yates book, which again is not a conspiracy text. She was a British scholar, and hence the term Dame. And she posits this theory. So this is her, and it's a well-known scholarly text. I think it's a Rutledge classic here, if you get this book. So understand, this is not a conspiracy book. This is an academic text. It's published by academic publishers. So there was another book that came out, some years back, called by Peter Gay, about the pagan Enlightenment. And this goes into more detail of, in what sense, what do you mean by pagan, right? So Peter Gay's book, which is pretty good, is The Enlightenment, Rise of Modern Paganism. These are academic texts. Again, they're not conspiracy books. So he does the overview of this, and then Dame Frances Yates' book is a much more scholarly deep dive into Rosicrucianism as the specific esoteric philosophy of that time period. So the exoteric is atheism. The exoteric is atheism. The esoteric is the Dame Frances Yates stuff, the Rosicrucian Enlightenment. All right. So we're way off track, but now you see you see the connections here, right? So the Hermetic Kabbalah is this Rosicrucian, not interested in Hebrew stuff per se, Kabbalah, which again is more like Neoplatonism. So you see that really this stuff is not that mystical. I mean, there's a philosophical element to it, but a lot of it's a bunch of gibberish. All right, so now we have all that in mind as the background to what we're talking about. Let's look at Isaac's article, and Isaac's going to have some interesting insights. I don't agree with everything that Isaac talks about in this article, but I did think he did a decent job of kind of summing up a lot of what we find in the books. So Isaac argues that there might be an MKUltra theme. It's possible, but we don't have evidence necessarily of Lewis Carroll himself doing this, so we don't know about that. But if he's in the circles of the Society for Psychical Research with Carl Jung, and if his books became super popular, it's very possible that Carl Jung read this. And remember, Carl Jung was when we did our Cure for Wellness breakdown, remember we came across that Bergholtz. Bergholtz was a giant, Swedish mental institute out of like a nightmare horror movie. Bergholtzy? It's like the archetype of a MK Ultra psychiatric ward. Remember that? That's yeah. Bergolzi. I mean, it plays the part, dude. It's the cutout. But now we got to have the picture of this place. So if you haven't seen Cure for Wellness, I recommend it. We covered this with Donut the other day on his channel. So let's look at this real quick, and then we'll go back to the book. Bergolzi was a giant Switzerland. This is why Carl Jung was there. Giant Switzerland psychiatric mental institute, MK Ultra place. And if you think I'm making that up, oh no, I'm not. In 1898, Eugene Bleuler became the director of Bergolzi, where he would remain until 1927. This is the Bleuler era. It is considered the most illustrious period at the hospital, largely due to the advent of psychoanalysis, Freudian techniques, and the creative work of his assistant, who? Carl Jung. Carl Jung. Bleuler. Had to do a Ben Stein joke. Followed by Hans Wolfgang Meyer and Manfred Bleuler. In addition to Carl Jung, renowned psychiatrists spent much of their career there, including Carl Abraham. Interesting. I'm pretty sure he comes up in a lot of the MK Ultra stuff. Ludwig Binswanger, a lot of these people I've never heard of. Eugene Minkowski, Hermann Rorschach test, we've heard of that. Franz Ricklin, Konstantin von Monaco, Eugene Bleuler, Ernst Rudin, Adolf Meyer, Abraham Brill, and Emil Oberholzer. Einstein's son, Edward Einstein, was a patient at Bergolzi. Whoa. Today, Bergolzi is an important center for psychiatric research and mental illness, so they're basically just the same stuff. The controversial who? Ewan Cameron studied at Bergolzi when? In the late 20s. And that's the what? The Eugene Bleuler period with Carl Jung. Now, what were they doing there? Oh, they were studying eugenics, hypnosis, sterilization. So, it is very plausible that Carl Jung read this and perhaps applied it to his archetypal integration. You know, we all know what Carl Jung's all about. But if he's working with Dr. Ewan Cameron of MK Ultra fame, perhaps also Ewan Cameron was familiar with this text. And if I recall, the only place I've ever been able to find a reference to Alice in Wonderland specifically in MK Ultra, I think it's in the John Marks book, where he says there's the chapter on re-imprinting, which is the idea that apparently Dr. Cameron thought when he was working at Mont Royal in Canada, he thought you could de-pattern and re-pattern or re-imprint a person to be a new person. So I'm assuming this is some kind of like behaviorist kind of idea that we're a blank slate, you know, tabula rasa, and that our whole personality is all determined by external stimuli. So if you reboot the person's mind, basically electroshock them and LSD dose them to like a reboot, then you give them new external stimuli. Supposedly, maybe the thought was, oh, we can heal people and just make them into a new being. That was what Ewan Cameron's re-imprinting stuff was. Anyway, one of the claims by one of the people under Cameron at, I believe, Mont Royal, which was basically the Canada version of Bergolzi. So this place right here. By the way, MK Ultra is all over the world. Okay, people don't know this, but the more that we dig into MK Ultra, and I've dug pretty deep. I'm not the deepest into this. There are people who've studied MK Ultra more than me, but I've read a lot on this. Okay, I'm pretty deep into MK Ultra. I've read basically all but one of the mainstream books on it. And there's quite a few, even by scholarly people. And we have books from the actual MK Ultra doctors too, which I've read. So I'm not an MK Ultra expert, but I know a lot about it. And it looks like if there is an Alice in Wonderland connection to MK Ultra, so far what I've been able to figure out is that it's this. The Montreal Experiments. What's the name of this place? Mont Royal? I thought it was Mont Royal. Is it Royal Victorian? This is it. By the way, this is not fake. This is all like people have been awarded settlements over this. You understand? This is not conspiracy theory, right? People have been given money because of Dr. Ewan Cameron's experiments and whatnot. That's a CBC, by the way. That's mainstream news. Somebody remind me. Mont Royal, that's it. The complex perched on the slope of Mont Royal is now called the Victoria Hospital at McGill University. So, by the way, McGill University used to be where they were doing MK Ultra in Canada. There it is. Dude, every one of these places is freaking straight out of a horror movie. Man, the horror movies are telling you the truth, bro. I'm telling you, look. I mean, if you watch Cure for Wellness, which it's not exactly about MK Ultra. It's relevant to MK Ultra, but it's not exactly about that. It's just the last movie that came up that I can think of, which was basically an MK Ultra movie. You know, where you have like I ain't gonna shop for that shit. I'm not trying to buy my way into the mind control facilities. It's a pretty good movie. Pretty good psychological horror thriller if you haven't seen Cure for Wellness. If you're looking for one of those, MK Ultra type movies. But it has to be. I'm speaking specifically of the MK Ultra movies taking place in a dang facility, right? Like this. It's got to look halfway like a castle. You know what I mean? Right? To be a real legit MK Ultra mind control facility, destroying your subconscious and smashing your mind into a million pieces, it's got to at least have some castle in it, right? It's got to be like 30%, 40% castle. It's not a legit MK Ultra facility. Anyway, so I guess it's the Allen Memorial Institute is what it was called from 1953 to 1973 at McGill University when they were doing the MK Ultra projects. So, all of that to say that one of the women who claimed, I meant to say Sucker Punch is of course the other movie where you get the classic mental institute creating of the altars. And we've covered Sucker Punch many times, right? Because she's in there with her, crew of bad bitches. And they are cabaret ladies, but they also happen to be altars. But they're also not really there. They're altars in, what's her name? Ellie Browning, or I forget her name. You know what I'm trying to say. Yeah, Sucker Punch is another one of these MK Ultra alternate Hollywood mind people. All right, so back to this. Anyway, the whole point of all that was just to say that in Search of the Manchurian Candidate, I think John Marks says that one of the women that was underneath Ewan Cameron, her claim is that Cameron was using Alice in Wonderland to try to re-imprint her. So far, that's what I can come up with. Now, in John C. Lilly's book, where he admits to doing some of this stuff as well, and dosing young children, programming and metaprogramming the human biocomputer, he doesn't mention Alice in Wonderland, but he does mention showing people on LSD, and I'm assuming he means the kids too. melting clocks and a lot of surrealist imagery that you would associate with Alice in Wonderland. So that's a tenuous connection, not explicitly Alice in Wonderland. But here's the book. This is, of course, the dolphin freak who had a thing for dolphins. Absolute degenerate, mind-controlled idiot. These people are the worst, right? Total mad science lunatic. And the idea is that, well, think about it. If the human body and the mind are computers, they're biological computers, well, you can erase and reboot a computer, right? Yeah, so erase it, reboot it with these toxins, and then use external stimuli to reprogram it. That's the basic idea here. And it's real. This is not made up stuff. This is all real. You understand? These are actual MKUltra doctors who have actual books that I've actually read and actually lectured on. And I've read about this for over 10 years. So, yeah, we're not in the conspiracy domain anymore, people. You understand? Now, pop culture associates all of these things with it. And there's some precedent for that association. But exactly whether or not Alice in Wonderland is used in MKUltra, so far I've only uncovered the claim of one of the women underneath Ewan Cameron. And I'm not saying she's lying. I'm just saying that so far that's the only hard documented connection that I can find. So anyway, Isaac in his article goes on to talk about a lot of what we talked about. So he was hanging out with Carl Jung, as we said. That's what gives us the connection to, because Carl Jung, as you know, remember everybody, Carl Jung is not just, he's not just a philosopher. Well, he's the greatest. He's the best. Well, he's not just that. He's also in the OSS. What? Yes, Carl Jung was a spy. And you can read his letters back and forth between Allen Dulles, because Carl Jung was Agent 488. And that's interesting because people think, wait a minute, he wrote these esoteric texts and he talks about, things that seem possibly pagan and maybe even Tiny Mustache Man. No, dude, he was informing to Dulles on Tiny Mustache Men followers for the OSS. He was Agent 488. And this is not just on Reddit. This is public. Here it is, Daily Beast. He was known as Agent 488 for the OSS. Carl Jung, OSS Agent 488. Here's the actual, I think this is the actual, one of his actual letters. Yeah, well, that's somebody's translation of the letter. Now, have you ever heard Dr. Jordan Peterson mention this? No, he doesn't ever mention this. But he says he's read the collected works, right? So if he's read the collected works, this is Carl Jung's Letters, Volume 1, 1906 to 1950. It's just, I'm not saying it's a conspiracy. It's just interesting he hasn't mentioned this, because I've talked about all this kind of stuff for a long time. And it's not a conspiracy theory. It's a actual historical fact. You can actually see that somebody has on one of these websites has scanned in the actual one of the telegrams back and forth between Allen Dulles and Carl Jung. Anyway, but that again makes the connection closer between Carl Jung and MKUltra. You see. And pretty much all of these dudes, right, are involved in MKUltra in varying ways and in differing degrees, because MKUltra was not one program. People get confused over this. By the way, can we get any support tonight? Anybody? If you're learning things, please support the show via the Streamlabs function and give me a super chat if you feel so inclined. If you want to be nice tonight, right there. So, guys, everybody wants to talk about in the chat. I'm not talking about my mods. I'm talking about these new people. Like, they don't want to talk about what tonight's topic is. Okay, that's not the topic tonight. If you're wondering about all these other topics, I just did a show with Jason Burmis about other topics. So go watch the Burmis show we just did. That's not tonight's topic. Is not that. We're talking about Carl Jung, and we're talking about Lewis Carroll. And we've gone way off into MK Ultra, but that's okay because we are live learning. We're live learning. And by the way, as to your question about Hebrew mysticism, I've already answered this. And I've talked about it 1,000,000 times. So, he's in the circles of Carl Jung via the Society for Psychical Research. Carl Jung is hanging out with, working with for many years at Bergolzi, Dr. Ewan Cameron of MK Ultra fame. And at Bergolzi, they're doing all kinds of MK Ultra stuff. And MK Ultra, again, is not just, can we mind control somebody? Can we sneak LSD and make them go crazy? No. It's vast numbers, dozens of programs at universities all over the world. And that's what people are discovering more and more, is that MK Ultra is not, used to, the researchers would say, the common phraseology would say, MK Ultra was not one program. MK Ultra was dozens of programs at dozens of universities in America, in North America. No, it's all over the world. They were doing MK Ultra research throughout Australia. There's a whole book on that. That was published not that long ago online. So you understand, people are piecing this together and figuring out, even still, new information is emerging. Hey, wait a minute, this guy, Carl Jung's over here working at Bergolzi with Dr. Ewan Cameron for years together in the Bleuler years at Bergolzi. And Lewis Carroll is hanging out to some degree with Freud and Jung at the Society for Psychical Research. And that also connected them to Blavatsky, although the Society for Psychical Research, interestingly, they did a debunking of Madame Blavatsky. And so Madame Blavatsky was, of course, a fraud because she got debunked in her seances. But that actually doesn't matter, because even though you can be a fraud and be a good spy, all good spies are frauds. And Madame Blavatsky, I believe, was working for British intelligence. And that explains why she was going to meet her ascended masters in the Far East, who were her handlers and her KGB contacts like Nicholas Roerich, another one of her occult associates. And remember, guys, again, people are mystified. I'm going to have to debunk you guys a little bit. I'm sorry to break your sensationalist fervor, but a lot of this occult gibberish, gobbledygook, it's just another way to have spies. Yes, you heard me right. Their codes, their code speak, their nerd codes. What's the Joaquin Phoenix's line in Signs? Right? He's like, there's no aliens. It's just a bunch of nerds talking to other nerds with their nerd codes. Exactly. Joaquin Phoenix. Guess what? It's the same thing. A lot of secret societies are just networks of espionage and spies. That's it. So, you're mysticism. No, dude. That's a bunch of woo-woo gibberish to cover up for. Madame Blavatsky's not going to meet ascended masters. She might have been possessed and into the demonic for sure. But when she's going to talk to ascended masters, that's her handlers. And that's Dr. Spence's theory. I think that's true. Anyway, now, Isaac talks about what we talked about in our video. And to be fair, Isaac, I had not read this article. Isaac wrote this article before I did my video. I had not read this. I did my video separate from Isaac's article, which I discovered recently. Isaac talks about the initiation element. Now, if Lewis Carroll is in the circles of the Golden Dawn, this seems plausible. This makes sense that there would be an initiatory element to it, because maybe the first, Alice in Wonderland it has its own themes of alternate personalities and whatnot. But through the Looking Glass, right, perhaps that's another initiatory movement as well, because in the first one, for example, she goes into the underworld. The rabbit is the psychopomp, right? The psychopomp is the literary device that leads us and takes us into the underworld. So following the White Rabbit takes her to the underworld. We have a classic hero's journey story of the descent, the Calabasas into the underworld, and then the return. It's classic ancient literature, very common. If you take literary classes, you'll learn this, like in the first one. So all this stuff is pretty common. And that would also parallel with Carl Jung's archetypal patterns as well. And that would, this is where you get Joseph Campbell, right? Joseph Campbell stuff is just like watered down Carl Jung. So hero's journey, Alice is doing that. But you can also read it as a descent into the subconscious. Because in the esoteric perspective, those two things are kind of the same. The esoteric journey into the abyss or into the underworld is the same as the descent of the conscious mind into the unconscious mind. Because the unconscious mind is the portal to the underworld in esoteric and even in other philosophies as well. So that is, I would say, I'm pretty certain that that's what Lewis is working with here. Now, in the second one, we don't go into the underworld. Okay, so in Through the Looking Glass, we go into the mirror world. So it's a little more self-consciously Neoplatonic. But in the first one, we go into the underworld. So that's the descent. That's the also part of the initiation rite as well. And so Isaac goes with the initiation reading, which I think is probably correct. Again, if he's in the circles of the Golden Dawn, if he's familiar with Carl Jung stuff, I think they would overlap. Would they overlap? He might not. Let me see if he overlaps. So it might be Jung. He might be too early for Jung to know Carl Jung, but Carl Jung would definitely be familiar with his stuff. So if he died in the late 1890s, could he have read? No. So Jung would be too young. Get it? Carl would be too young for him to read. However, Jung would be pulling from Carroll, because as we saw, Carroll died in the 1890s, right? Was that right? Thank you guys for the super chats. Appreciate the support. We're trying to go deep here. I mean, you guys like the deep dive analysis, right? I mean, nobody else goes this deep, right? I mean, I'm not trying to knock everybody, right? We got our friends. I'm not talking about our friends go deep, right? Kotel goes deep. Isaac goes deep. I'm not dissing our friends. I'm saying, like, if you were to scour the internet for analyses of this book, or choose the YouTube videos for these literary works, dude, nobody goes even close to where we go. Now, there's some nerds, I have to admit, like if you type in a Dune analysis, okay, there's nerds, there's Spurgatrons that know Dune better than I'll ever know Dune, okay? But they only know Dune, okay? They can't tell you about perennialism. They don't know anything about Dune utilizing MK Ultra principles. They don't know anything about that. That's way out of their pay grade, okay? So nerds can only give you like the intra-context level of the book, okay? They can master all the nerddom, but they can't tell you anything beyond that. So they're basically worthless unless you're looking for a detail about, what happens in Dune Part 5 to the Worm Emperor or whatever. Okay, the nerds can help you out there. They can't tell you nothing about Neoplatonism. I'll tell you that much. So if he died in 1898, yeah, then so he could he wouldn't have known Carl Jung unless he was into Carl Jung as like a 15-year-old, which he might have been. You know what I'm saying? Y'all get my jokes. All right, so back to Isaac's point. A couple more. I don't agree with all of Isaac's symbolism references here, although overall Isaac's article is pretty good. There's a couple places where I disagree with the symbol, but he admits that he's kind of maybe reaching or speculating about some of the symbolism. He talks about Lewis Carroll's odd interest in apparently young women, I guess, young girls. Professed to be Christian, but was more so into Neoplatonism, it seems. We talked about all that. Let's see. The name Alice, I thought, isn't Aletheia truth in Greek? Anyway. Aletheia. What's truth in Greek? I didn't think it was Alice, but maybe it's close to Alice. So Isaac talks about the descent. That's what we just talked about, as above, so below. Microcosm, macrocosm. That's true. And it's true not just of the underworld when Alice descends there, but also when she goes into the mirror world. So I wanted to talk about this point because this is another potential connection between MK Ultra and Alice in Wonderland, and that's the drug element. So a lot of the scholarship says there's not really any hard data that we can, as far as, unless there's something, Aletheia, excuse me. So it's not Alice, but it's close enough. But as far as I could tell, it doesn't look like Lewis Carroll was doing drugs. And this is important because everybody says, well, what about the Cheshire Cat? Isn't he smoking a hookah? Alice, we have mushrooms, and we have Alice eating and drinking things that make her smaller, bigger, whatever. It seems plausible that the circles that he was in, if he's hanging out with these Golden Dawn people, I would say yes. They were probably experimenting with opium dens, hashish, right? If you remember, so Conan Doyle is in these circles, and Conan Doyle has Sherlock go to opium dens in some of the stories, right? Because I've read the Conan Doyle's Sherlock stories, but it's been many years, so I don't remember all the details. But doesn't Sherlock, I know that Benedict Cucumber Bender Snatch, I know that he goes to opium dens, but I want to think that it's part of the stories, because if you remember, Sherlock has a spy network, and he sets up these spy networks, like the hobos. He's got a hobo spy network, and he's got like drug den spy networks that tell him information, and people wonder why that is. Well, Sherlock represents British intelligence, first of all, because his brother Mycroft explicitly is basically British intelligence. They hang out at Boodle's Club, which is, I think, where all the British intelligence people were supposed to be at. And the address, 221B Baker Street, is actually a reference to British intelligence. I read that in a Conan Doyle biography one time. So if you didn't know that, that also connects via Conan Doyle in the circles with Lewis Carroll with British intelligence. And by the way, I just told you that already, because many of the Anglican people were also British intelligence and spies. So yes, shocker, right? British intelligence also recruited from Anglican ministers, of course. In fact, I remember a famous, I think somebody in Rushdoony's group wrote a book about a famous Anglican spy. He was a missionary, soldier, spy, did all these kind of crazy missions. I forget his name, though. But it wasn't, I don't think Rushdoony wrote the book, but somebody in Rushdoony's circles wrote this book about this famous Anglican adventurer or spy man. So, anyway. Is somebody doubting me on that? Let's see what we get when we search it. By the way, I think when Jamie and I went there, I think we went by 221B Baker Street. So now it's a museum. Okay, so of course YouTube basically, I mean, Google basically doesn't work. It basically pulls up absolutely nothing that you're looking for. But I did read that in a biography of Conan Doyle, and that there's a reason why he chose that address, because the address used to be something connect. It might have been maybe a safe house for British intelligence at one point. So anyway, it's a coded reference to British intelligence. But anyway, Mycroft is actually British intelligence. But I'm trying to remember if that's in the books, right? Because after a while, you start mixing the TV presentations with the books. You know what I mean? So let's see what not Boodles, it's Diogenes Club. Excuse me. So Mycroft Holmes is the elder brother. He's a government official. He's a British intelligence operative. So let's see. Sherlock visits him at the Diogenes Club. Mycroft's position is unique. His position is a role that never has anything been like it, nor will there ever be. So he's some sort of like super spy, basically. Anyway, we're way off topic, but we're doing non-schizo stream of consciousness association here. So this is the proper way to do analysis and association, not the way schizos and crazy conspiracy idiots do it. Let's see. So Isaac theorizes that there's a kind of communion that Alice is undergoing here. With she drinks the bottle of liquid, she eats the cake, so it's like bread and wine, but it perhaps could be a drug version of this kind of a thing. And Huxley speaks of drugs as this way, right? So Doors of Perception, other books, he speaks of various types of hallucinogenic drugs being the sacrament of the future religion. If you remember that. We covered that when we did our Doors of Perception breakdown. So that makes sense that the people in these circles could have been experimenting with drugs. As you guys know, Crowley's drug diary, which if Lewis Carroll is in the circles of Golden Dawn people, perhaps he knew or met Crowley. I'm not sure about that. Maybe he did. But Crowley was doing drug diaries where he was recording his experiences, and Dr. Spence theorizes that Crowley's drug diaries influenced Huxley because they partied together and presumably did drugs together. They might have even touched butts together, like butt to butt, I don't know. Very possible, but, pun intended, it looks like that could be another potential connection, right? So maybe he is adding the drug element to the novels as part of the initiation or whatever this book is supposed to be. Thank you guys for those super chats. Much appreciated. You can support the stream via the super chat function right there. If you're learning new things, feel free to support us. So Isaac talks about initiation, going into the underworld. We've covered that. Here, I'm not sure I buy this. This is kind of a reach. Isaac says, so we know that Alice has a couple kitties. One of them is called Dinah, and the other one is called, I think, just called Kitty. And one of them is black, one of them is white. Is this the two pillars? I mean, I do think the black and white is important because we get a lot of either ors. So the whole novel is concerned with word games, logic puzzles, either ors, and then that's going to be part of where I talk about dialectics. Wonderland, as we know, or the Looking Glass world, is arranged in a bunch of giant squares, which is the Masonic floorboard. It's also the chessboard. So it's possible that I think the black and white kitty mean this, but the fact that Dinah is close to Binah, I don't buy that. So I'm not buying the word association there for Kabbalism. Isaac makes a potential connection between the High Priestess tarot deck and the idea of the Red Queen, the White Queen, and Isis. This is possible. The Golden Dawn definitely has a high place for Isis in their ritual philosophy or whatever. So this seems plausible that there could be Golden Dawn magic elements in this. Tarot decks, don't they have a close association with playing card decks? And we know the playing card characters come to life in the Wonderland stories. So this seems plausible, a potential tarot card, playing card connection. Jamie, can you come here? Isn't there a connection between playing cards and tarot cards? Okay, so just yeah. No information on that, just yeah. Okay. Could you make me another coffee, by the way? Thank you. Someone who knows more about the history of playing cards and tarot cards could... I guess we can look that. We've looked everything else up, so let's look this up. Now, was the Rider-Waite tarot deck, is that from the Golden Dawn? Jamie? Yeah. So the most famous tarot deck that everybody thinks about when they see the images of the Hanged Man or whatever, that's a Golden Dawn playing card deck. So yes. So now this is just wiki crap, so who knows? I don't know how historical this is, but apparently you can use playing cards as a form of divination, right? So playing cards can be, you can lay them out the way that you lay out tarot cards for divination or whatever. But I was looking for the actual history of this. I don't know the history of how far back tarot cards go with playing cards. But I'm assuming there's probably some overlap there. So anybody, people that know about this, you can tell me about this. That's not something I know a lot about. But let's see, back to Isaac's article. Isaac then theorizes about MK Ultra and child abuse. I don't know about that. He's wrong about the Germanic goddess of Ostara. That's not Easter. Ostra wasn't that just the Germanic term for the spring? And Easter is Pascha. Okay, so the words don't necessarily mean pagan deities. But that's remember that, because we're going to talk here in a little bit about the mistake that dumb conspiracy people make, that evangelical people make, that schizo people make, and heretics make with word concept fallacies and false either-ors. We'll notice this in a minute, because this is actually part of the dialogues that Alice has with some of these characters. So then Isaac talks about, MK Ultra and the notion of dissociation. Now, I do think, I don't know that, again, we don't know if this novel was in any way written with the intention of some kind of mind control. Maybe there was people experimenting with this in his day, maybe in his Golden Dawn circles, but we just don't know. Maybe eventually information will come forward showing that. But it does look like later people, possibly you and Cameron, use this as a experiment. That's as far as I can say, right? But you've got like Fritz Springmeier, right? He places like a huge amount of like, oh yeah, like the novel was written as a way to create altars and mind control. I mean, but what's the proof of that, right? So it's a claim, but how do we prove that? So, as far as I can tell, it hasn't been demonstrated. It might be true, but it hasn't been. So that is a theory. Okay. So again, we're always distinguishing what can be demonstrated with facts and evidence, facts and logic. We're straight up Ben Shapiro facts and logic, which don't care about your feelings. Facts and logic don't care about your feelings. Versus theories. And I'm not opposed to theories. We just always want to be clear when we're theorizing and we don't have hard data, right? Per se. Dave McGowan's theory that many of the serial killers might be a form of Phoenix program, it's a theory. There's some evidence that suggests that. There are some programs to use serial killers. Do we then say, can we make the leap every serial killer is a mind-controlled programmed assassin from the Phoenix program. We don't know that. So we have to be guarded and not rash in our leaps. What's the fallacy? I'm drawing a blank here. I'm supposed to know this stuff, right? Hasty generalization or a rash inference, right? And we also have to keep in mind other fallacies that are particularly dangerous for conspiracy-minded people, right? What are the two fallacies that conspiracy people always fall into? Texas sharpshooter fallacy and the gambler's fallacy. Just remember, as a theorizer of real-world geopolitical events and so forth, we have to not fall into the temptations of thinking, for example, gambler's fallacy, I rolled a 6 on the dice 3 times in a row. Does that mean or in any way determine that my next roll will be a 6? Absolutely not. That's the gambler's fallacy. And conspiracy theorists fall into this all the time. It's like a classic mistake of conspiracy-minded people. Anyway, we've talked about that before. We're not going to be talking about that when we get to the conspiracy people. We're almost there. So Isaac, my academic text says that the theory of some people is that Lewis Carroll himself was MPDDID, which does make sense given the fact that other elements that come forth in the novel is, aside from his fixation of taking photographs of young people, that the novel is actually dealing with, we're talking about Through the Looking Glass here, with adulthood. So the move from childhood to adulthood. And confronting the elements of the adult world that don't make sense to a kid. And realizing as a kid that you will have to eventually grow up and become an adult. So the direct, literal interpretation of Alice as she progresses... Alice as... I can't believe you confused me with her. Unbelievable. Alice, as she progresses through the novel, she eventually gets a crown because she wants to be a queen. So in this level of interpretation, this is about Alice wanting to become an adult. And she sees grown women. She sees that they have... they can do things that she can't do as a kid. They have privilege. Adults have privileges that kids don't have. So it's partly a novel about grappling with growing up and becoming an adult. And we know that, that's pretty much an undisputed element of this novel. Everybody says this. But we know that Carroll had an issue with this because he was a very lonely adult. And it might have to do with his perversions or proclivities. I don't know. But he apparently had a hard time with becoming an adult. This might have been why he had this perhaps regressive, childlike alter personality. Perhaps he was abused himself that caused this alter personality, trauma-based abuse. Who knows? It might have happened to him, right? And so on one level, it's that. It's grappling with the things that don't make sense in the adult world. Like you get to grow up, you have freedom, but you're going to die. Why do we have to die? Well, you can't stop it. If I can't stop dying, then is everything something that I can't stop? Why can't I cause things to be different in the world? Well, there's just this fixed, determined law that you're going to die. Does that mean everything's fixed? So you see how it kind of falls over into this predestinarian theme. So themes in the novel include, these are my notes, physical and emotional transformation, dealing with what's going to happen as you get older, the loneliness that will come about as you grow up. Apparently he was, as far as we know, maybe celibate. Don't know if he was Skittles or PDF, maybe. But apparently he doesn't have any relationships that we know of, so apparently he was lonely. In his life, he sought a lot of love and approval. Apparently he didn't get it. He was obsessed with the trauma of growing up and the questions of life and death. Although we have these disciplines like logic and mathematics that he's studying, he's concerned with things that don't make sense. So how can we have logic, mathematics, these rational, coherent disciplines, seemingly, that he's studying, and yet when confronted with the world out there, everything seems to not make sense. It's contradictions. Society isn't organized in a just way. There's the oppression of the elites against the non-elites, the plebs, the garbage people, the vulgars, the skanks. There's corruption amongst the nobility. Why are the corrupt in charge? I think that's what Humpty Dumpty represents. Because he's fat, he's well-fed, he's all about fashion and style. He knows his fashions. He corrects her when she confuses a belt with a cravat. And his whole thing is to constantly say that... Thank you.
That's well.
Yeah. His whole thing is to constantly say, the king will save me. The king will put me back together. If I fall apart, if I fall, and notice he's perched on a wall above her, and he says, well, if I fall down and break, like, the king will send his horses, they'll put me back together. So it's this sort of the upper wealthy class or the nobility that appeal to and worship the king. He's always talking. He's always name dropping, right? He's like, the king knows me, and I know the White Queen. They gave me this cravat, right? So he represents the fat, indulgent, lazy, wealthy, and upper class that sort of sucked up to the king and the queen, I think.
It starts right there in the corner.
So Jamie, by the way, has an analysis she wanted me to mention. If you want to get Jamie's book, you can head on over to my website and get her Weird Stuff book. She has a whole section on Alice in Wonderland and the conspiracy reading of the text. So she goes into the connections that Disney had with this story. So obviously Disney is much later, into the 20s, 30s, 40s. But Disney had an intense fascination with this story. Everybody's, I'm sure, seen the Disney version of Alice in Wonderland. I actually haven't seen that since I was a kid. So what's fresh in my mind is the books. So I don't even remember. I mean, I remember a few images from the Disney one, but I don't even remember what all was in the Disney one. So I can't speak too much to the Disney version of it because... but anyway, if you want Jamie's take, you can get signed copies of her book over at the website. Also, this notion of if he did have split personality, this also could have contributed to why he believed that you could pass into a mirror world, right? So if that's his inner weird experience, however that works for people that have this MPD, DID dilemma. And by the way, there was a movie that came out with Matthew from Downton Abbey. I forget that guy's name. And you're saying, why are you talking about Matthew from Downton Abbey? Well, I'm going to show you. Because this is another thing that popped up that I didn't expect. And I don't know how much scholarly basis there is to this. Because when I was in undergrad and grad school, I took a lot of lit classes. I've had a lot of lit stuff, so I know it pretty well. But what I don't know is much of the history of the authors. So I know about Dostoevsky, but like I couldn't tell you anything about Charles Dickens. I don't remember much about him. But did you see that movie with what's his freaking name? They made a Charles Dickens movie, and you're watching it, and I'm like, okay, so they're gonna make I didn't even really want to watch this. Jamie really wanted to watch it. And it's like, you got the dude from Downton Abbey playing him. Is it this one? Yeah, the man who invented Christmas. What's that guy's name? Matthew. Dan Stevens, right? And I'm watching this movie, and he's got multiple personality disorder. And I'm like, what? And so they're basically theorizing that Charles Dickens also was MPD-DID, and perhaps that's how he came up with all this vast Spurgatron world of characters. I mean, I don't know, right? But so it's this movie here, and he kind of goes nuts. I have no idea if this is based on anything legit, though, right? Like, I don't know if Charles Dickens had altars, but that's the theory of this movie. In the movie, you're watching it, and basically, like, all the characters are like Scrooge, you know? They're like altars in his head. And I wasn't expecting this. This is getting crazy. So, anyway, let me see if I hit all my notes here. Oh, next thing we want to get to is if there is an occultic element, as we said, there might be the notion of the alienation of Sophia. So Alice might be the feminine principle who is exiled from her original world, her happy world, her Eden world, into this crazy world. So we're moving beyond the interpretation of just a young girl growing up into adulthood and maturation, but perhaps an esoteric Sophia principle where Sophia creates a prison world where she's trapped, and thus Alice is a fallen soul into a fallen prison world, a Gnostic reading, like we are. Hence the dream interpretation. If you don't know, right, you get this dream revelation at the end of Through the Looking Glass. So that's also possible. The other element, as we wanted to say, is the linguistic stuff. So let's talk about a few of the problems of the linguistics. Language in the book, language can cause and anticipate events. And for example, nursery rhymes in the story actually cause events to occur. In two cases, we have the exchange with Tweedledee and Tweedledum and the discussion with Humpty Dumpty. So this is interesting because in the other world, you have wordplay that in this world, we think of it as simply wordplay. But in that world, for example, she talks about Humpty Dumpty, then Humpty Dumpty falls, right? Is that right? I'm trying to remember exactly every detail. Does he fall? I just read that the other night. I'm trying to remember. Because he's saying, if I fall, it won't matter because all the king's horses, all the king's men will put us back together. Oh, in the Raven. When she's arguing with Tweedledee and Tweedledum, somebody mentions a crow, and then a giant crow appears. So in this world, the words that you speak actually can cause reality to occur. And that, again, that would suggest Kabbalism, right? So if that's the case, in that dimension of the potentia, the realm of potentiality, the imaginal realm, which is where she is, right? That does cause, the words cause things to be real. That could be Kabbalistic as well. Where she enters is specifically a mirror world, right? So she walks through the mirror because in the first sequence, she's playing with her kittens and she's playing with some toys and there's a chessboard. And so everything that's in her real world, when she steps into the mirror world, there's a corollary to it. But in that world, the things are alive and they become kind of guides on her journey, her process. They're the new psychopomps, so to speak, even though she doesn't go to an underworld. They become sort of the animal guides or the spirit guides, like you might see a shamanic initiation with the animal, people wear the mask and the animal spirits and they're dancing around and they're part of this quest, hero's quest journey that you're on. So we're moving into the Gnostic and or initiation journey reading of the text. I think this is probably the case. And in this sense, it would be she's grappling with all of the predetermined game theory stuff. Again, he's a mathematician. He likes Neoplatonism. So is the world a matrix of controlled, determined events based on a strict causal chain? Or is Alice able to figure out the matrix, solve it, become a queen herself, and awaken from her dream? The sleeper must awaken. And thus, in waking up, does she then achieve self-actualization, self-will, to not be determined by the Matrix? And I'm not joking when I say the Matrix, because it's not an accident that you get the Matrix from this. Okay? Movies like The Matrix could never have happened if you didn't have stories like this. So in a way, Lewis Carroll is anticipating simulation theory way before it comes about. But I mean, we're not going to totally give him credit for simulation theory, because ultimately Platonism and Gnosticism are forms of simulation theory way before Bostrom posits it, and Elon Musk talks about it, right? So Nick Bostrom posits it, in like 2002, 3, or 4, or whatever, simulation theory. Spurgatrons and computer nerds talk about it. Dude, have you ever seen like The Matrix? Like whatever in a computer simulation, right? Everybody since The Matrix has talked. Every nerd, every hacker man has talked about this theory. And then we get, of course, Elon making it more popular by talking about it a few years ago. What if we're in a Matrix? You couldn't have had any of that, in my view, without Alice in Wonderland. Because not only does Alice in Wonderland influence The Matrix and the White Rabbit and all that, and by the way, remember, Neo actually goes to the mirror. Remember that? I just remember that. Neo doesn't just follow the White Rabbit. When he takes the pill, he goes in the mirror. Another Through the Looking Glass reference. And I just now remember, I mean, it's been a long time since I watched The Matrix, but they reference Alice in Wonderland a lot in The Matrix, if you remember. Which is, again, yeah, The Matrix is totally 100% a Gnostic, Neoplatonic thing. But the other element that I'm getting at here, which is the unique contribution, I think, of perhaps Lewis in this notion, is the determinist mathematics element. Because as this mathematician, he's clearly conflicted and concerned with predetermination and mathematical determination. If we live in a giant math matrix, then every action is determined. So how do we get out of this? Well, we got to go past the ice wall. I'm just joking. That's a joke. How do we get out of this? Oh, we got to fly up to the ice to the snowball dome that covers Earth and bust through. I'm joking, right? We get full Eddie Bravo up in here. I'm just joking. How do we get out of it? Well, presumably there's some sort of process by which one awakens, right? The sleeper must awaken. So, are we in a computer simulation? Are we in a dream state? Or is it a surrealist thing? So is it anticipating surrealism? Probably. Because if the story, as you know, I'm not going to the end, because this is a part one. If you want the full analysis, we got a lot more to go through. I'm going to do the pattern recognition stuff, the examples of the schizo stuff, the dialectic stuff, and the second half of the story in the part two. So we've talked about the fixation on the either or. She enters the mirror world. There's these shamanic elements, is very much like the Matrix. The Matrix plays on this heavily. The monster, the Bandersnatch, Bandersnatch is Jabberwocky, right? This part was kind of confusing. By the way, this is actually a complex novel. If you don't have the illustrated version, for example, if you're reading the chapter about Haya and Hata, it's a play on the way the British say hare and hatter. Hata. So it's a play on how the British say it, and if you don't have the visuals of the excellent illustrations of the Tierney guy, you don't know that that's just the Mad Hatter and the hare who make a reappearance in the story. A lot of things in this Mirror Land also are backwards, and everything's cattywampus, right? So you walk forward in some places to go backwards. In some places, when she talks to the red queen. Yeah, she talks to the red queen and the white queen. One of the queens, and she talks about her future memories. And so they have this exchange about, Alice says, well, you can only remember things in the past. And the queen makes fun of her and says, well, that's very limiting. So you don't even remember all the future events that haven't happened yet. So she's moving in reverse to go forward. We'll talk about the flowers being alive. We'll talk about cause and effect, operating in a different way. So a lot of contradictions on purpose. We'll talk about the meaning of the blended animals in the part 2. And then we're going to get deep into the metaphysics, as we said, because you have the famous story of the tortoise and the hare, which plays an important role in the Douglas Hofstadter book, Gödel, Escher, Bach. And actually many mathematicians have fixated on the story of the tortoise and the hare because it's a kind of a, excuse me, not the tortoise and the hare, what the tortoise said to Achilles. It ends up being this kind of mathematical puzzle that we're going to talk about. So, this is a work of definitely high IQ spurgatism to the max. There's a lot going on. There is definitely an occult esoteric element. Other books too, I forgot to mention Flatland by Edwin Abbott. We'll talk about some of that in the part 2. Yeah, they're on a chessboard, and that's why all the squares are laid out in this certain way, which I think is part of the mathematical determinism and the game theory, right? So he's looking at a chessboard in a mathematical way, Lewis Carroll, I'm saying. And for him, he's reading that as a kind of determinism. So let's see, we got a super chat from, if you want to support the show, by the way, you can do it right now. Actually, I got one thing I got to tell you. Before we move to the super chats, this is really important. Our AI, Vivek Ramaswamy, has something he wants to tell you.
I'm going to put you on something. Downsides to consuming nasty fake sucralose. Each dose of Chad mode contains the kick of a cup and a half of coffee.
I want to show off something that we're all proud of. I got a browser here. This is Jay Dyer's much vaunted, much sought after Philosophy 101. Now, he just got this page up. We are just testing it out. You guys are some of the first people in the world to see it. I want to say, for my part, it's not Philosophy 101. I think this is a mistitling. I really think of it as like Philosophy Unleashed, because a Philosophy 101 course, they give you kind of some useless information that you can't make sense of. Jay actually lays out over 12 weeks, dozens and dozens of hours put into just the presentation of this, let alone the hundreds and thousands of hours of research that it takes to have a coherent evolution and history of the origins of philosophy, the uses of philosophy, the different ways to look at it over time, and how that has been brought about to what we have today, which is almost an absence of philosophy on the objective logic and reason side, and an overabundance of woke philosophy that is irrational and is made up day by day as people are like, I think we should bring racism back. And then here's a justification. And then it gets wokeified and spread out. And then all of a sudden you have a bunch of communist, socialist ideas where you become the property in action. You need to be able to stand your own ground. It helps to have a foundation in philosophy, because it's a method to find truth. When you get down to it, philosophy is there because you love truth enough to go and learn how to find it because it's valuable. So if you're interested in things like that, there is the landing page. We'll link it up in the notes. It is a longer one, so we'll get a shorter URL for this. I'm sure Jay has a link on his page. I just wanted to show it off. Now you know it exists. You can go look for it and see why this is not your father's philosophy, right? So well done. I'm proud of everyone who helped to produce and edit the course. And of course, Jay did a flawless job in presenting the course over those 12 weeks. And he's a juggernaut. He's another guy, just like John Bush.
I'm going to put you on something crazy real quick. Most of these Zoomer gym bros are consuming macro-guzzling synthetic dyes and synthetic sweeteners on the daily. They don't even know it. Goofy AF. There's nothing great about that. Do not listen any further unless you are an alpha or sigma male. This is important and there could be consequences. There's a new certified sigma male pre-workout powder for sigmas only. It is guaranteed to empower you to dominate your co-workers, fire your boss, aggressively gamble, or invade a small village. Chad Mode stands out from the crowd by excluding artificial flavors, preservatives, sweeteners, and dyes. We've even avoided so-called natural flavors, which are actually not natural at all, ensuring a clean and effective formula. Experience the pure goodness of Chad Mode, colored with organic blue spirulina extract, organic lemon, cherry, and organic maple crystals. Forget synthetic caffeine made in a sketchy Chinese lab. Embrace the natural power of organic green coffee bean extract, which will get your mind going and pump you up to the max. Chad Mode is made in America with all clean ingredients, the first clean pre-workout of its kind. Why are these people adding synthetic sweeteners to every single pre-workout when there are many studied downsides to consuming nasty fake sucralose? Each dose of Chad Mode contains the kick of a cup and a half of coffee, delivering a surge of energy alongside essential vitamins, minerals, amino acids, and herbal extracts. Chad Mode will allow you to fire your boss and dominate anyone who opposes you. Chad Mode will make you more dominant in your daily life, so proceed with caution. It's as simple as mixing 1 or 2 scoops of our fine powder into water or juice, providing you with a delicious, energizing beverage featuring a burst of sweet organic fruit flavor. Chad Mode will give you the extra edge you desperately crave. Don't miss out. Secure your supply of Chad Mode on TikTok Shop with a limited...
Yes, I hit the wrong mute. There's like 5 mutes, so let's go to Super Chats. If you do want my breakdown from 5 years ago of the first one, I will put that in the chat for you. I'll try to remember to link it. There it is right here. So you can go watch that if you want to be refreshed on Alice in Wonderland. And this is a 5 year later part 2. So it took us long enough. So there's that. Go watch that. You can go do that on your own time. Do it on your own time. All right. Super chats. Jack, $5. We forgive you for being late. We know you was busy making up a mega planet. I like that he gave us the option of being included in the discussion of whether he should make a mega planet. Like, he didn't just go ahead and make it. You know what I mean? Like, he could have just done it. But no, he chose to include us in the discussions of the making of a mega planet. So if you guys don't know what I'm talking about, we had a ruckus time in last night's live stream right here. Internal monologues, Sam Hyde, TikTok cults, star seeds, and therions. And if you don't know what therions are, you can educate yourself by last night's stream. But I did specifically clip out the funniest part where I had not seen this clip, and it was one of the funniest clips I'd seen in a long time. And this dude, he might even top organic like us. He might even be better, but you can watch that clip right there to see what I thought was so funny. Not Sane, Theocracy Advocate, $2. Do you speak of Heidegger's Dasein? I have not spoken much of that. I had one class on Heidegger. I don't know a whole lot about Heidegger, so something I need to probably dive into. I've read a couple secondary sources on Heidegger, but I haven't dived Divin. I haven't gotten into the depths of Heidegger. What do you think about phenomenology? Oh, I had 2 classes on phenomenology. I did get pretty deep into Husserl. There's some interesting things there. Is it compatible with orthodoxy? I view it as that. I don't see death as necessary. Well, I'm not sure what you mean, because even though it's not necessary, it's still a reality. So there's different types of necessity, right? So there's necessity, and then like Leibniz speaks of necessity ex hypothesi, which is a necessity that's a different type of necessity. So, Kristen, $5. All this Gematria talk has me requesting that you sing 7 by Prince. Interesting. I am open to that, but we got to see if there is a karaoke version. And I'll have to probably... All 7, and we'll watch them fall. Stand in the way of love, and we will smoke them all. With an intellect and a savoir-faire, no one in the whole universe will ever compare. I am yours now, you are mine. Together we'll love through space and time, so don't cry. One day all 7 will die. How's that? I didn't even need the backups. I don't even need them karaoke machines. So there is a karaoke version, but I'm afraid if I play it... See, the thing with the karaoke versions is you never know if it's going to ding the thing or not. And for whatever reason, Mac Morrison, Return of the Mac, whatever his name is, that doesn't ding the thing. So for whatever reason, you can play it forever. But a lot of these karaoke versions will. Y'all need to go learn about the therions. Yeah, you can become a bird man. Even though you can't fly, you can become a bird man. So, but Kristen, if by chance the karaoke doesn't ding the thing, I'll do it on the regular. Because... by the way, do not get your eschatology from Prince. Okay, so even though I like Prince, we don't want to get any of our eschatological views from the crazy nonsense of Prince's 7. That's some heterodox madness right there. Arena, $25. Thank you so much. That's a nice fat super chat. Appreciate that very much. Rami, $5. How do you know music is being used in MK Ultra? How do I know music's being used? Well, I don't know that I claimed music is being used in MK Ultra, but I do think we've talked about it before. I mean, MK Ultra is a vast number of studies, projects, fronts, experiments done at universities, psychiatric institutions, prisons, military institutions. I mean, it's vast. And they studied all kinds of stuff. So they were interested, for example, in studying LSD, that kind of stuff, entheogens. Gordon Wasson and his Russian wife, they were interested in sleep studies with the Harry, the psycho serial killer guy from Australia that we talked about, Harry what's-his-face, that did all the sleep research at the MK Ultra facility in Australia, which is a big sleep institute. And he ended up killing a bunch of people because he was doing sleep experiments, putting people right at the edge of death and then bringing them back. Which, if you watch that Netflix show, what's it called, the AO or whatever, with that Brit Marling chick who's like in every weird... Like, for a while there, every weird sci-fi movie had her in it. Remember that? The OA, excuse me. And this would have been such a good show. It was like on the verge of being a great show. If they had not ended the season 1 with that stupid ass dance. I mean, this would have been one of the best TV shows of all time. Seriously. If they had not done that stupid ass dance, it makes me so mad. What happened to the camera? Can y'all see me? Or did it cut out? What's going on? It says excellent connection. Did it cut out? Can y'all see me? I can't tell it because the... Okay, now it says it's back. Yeah, this was such a good show. And anyway, basically every movie she's in, there's like another dimension with her in it. It's like she's in like 7 movies with some weird metaphysical shit going crazy. She's basically like the sci-fi version of Alice in Wonderland. It's like whatever movie she's in, that's what's happening. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, and then she goes into other dimension. I mean, it's just crazy. She goes into older dimension. I actually thought it was a great show until that stupid dance scene to prevent the shooting event. I thought that was so stupid. And imagine me being really invested in the show. It wasn't that long. I don't know, 8 episodes maybe for the first season. And I mean, it was great. Like, she gets kidnapped by this MK Ultra doctor, and he's got her in this facility, and are they going to get out? And they're putting people to the point of death and bringing them back. It's probably been influenced by that serial killer in Australia. I cannot ever remember his name, but we've covered him multiple times now. He's actually a serial killer because he killed a bunch of these people at this Harry. It's not Harry Ball. Harry Bailey. That's him. Yeah, this is him. Bunch of people died. 20 committed suicide, and then he also unalived as well when he got discovered. So basically, this dude is like the I forget that British actor's name, but he's the bad guy, and this guy right here in the OA. Remember in the first season? So I can never remember this dude's name. He's like a evil looking version of Timothy Dalton. Anyway. I don't know. We're way off course. I'm rambling now. Let's see. Next up. Snagglebees, $5. Why is a raven like a writing desk? Well, it's the word play, right? Because both begin phonetically with ra, even though they're totally different letters. Thank you for educating us. Exactly. Storm the Cat, $5. Do you think Merlin would be a spy in modern times? If you read the 3rd Space Trilogy book by C.S. Lewis, they bring Merlin back, and he's like, that part's funny, dude, because he's like, if you remember when they bring him back, and England is run by the Tavistock Technocrat Institute, right? And he's like, these people are evil people are ruling us, and Merlin's like, call the Emperor of Byzantium to come help us. And he's like, they're like, bro, there's no Emperor of Byzantium. And then he's like, then call the King of England. And they're like, he ain't gonna help, dude. Trust me. Storm the Cat, $5. Do occultists in real life use magic wands? Yeah, it's a representation of the phallus. So, what is their purpose? Well, the idea is that as a representation of my phallus, the magic wand is a thing to channel and direct energy. So, just watch Harry Potter, bro. Go watch Harry, because he's over there with his basically slinging his ding-a-ling everywhere is what it is. Then you start saying, well, how does Hermione have a ding-a-ling? Exactly. I'm not sure. Why do women, if the wand is a phallus, then what's Hermione doing over there with a ding-a-ling? Anyway, Ortho Katek, $5. A Eurocentric world is talked about by John Ruskin and Cecil Rhodes. Seems like the mainstream history. Even Oswald Spengler talks about this. Correct. Exactly. He does. History doesn't begin in Europe. Yes, agreed. Making the USA is a continuous outworking of Rome and Greek history. Yeah, that's a good point. Each country has its own history. except for the experimental Enlightenment nation of America, which is intended to be that Rosicrucian, Francis Bacon, New Atlantis. Exactly. So we came full circle there. Oh, by the way, I got another little side treat for y'all that will be coming up soon to do analysis of. And that is... So I stumbled upon this book that I did not know was a John le Carré novel. So I found this book at the bookstore, and I was like, this looks good. And I didn't realize that they'd already made this into a show. And perhaps some of you over the past 5 or 6 years had mentioned this to me, and I forgot. I don't know. But this was pretty wild. So have you guys watched Little Drummer Girl? It's only one season. And it's got freaking Skarsgård. And by the way, he has scars on his back. So he's literally Skarsgård in this show. Florence Pugh and Michael Shannon. And it's all about this Mossad hit team operation that John le Carré wrote about. It's fiction in 1982. And of course, as you guys know, le Carré was actual MI5 and MI6 British intelligence operative. So the le Carré stories are actually real world-ish spy stories, far more realistic than Bond stories, right? Even though Ian Fleming, yes, puts some truth in all the Bond stories, what le Carré wanted to do was be the anti-Bond, right? So he wanted to make his spy stories be super realistic. And man, oh man, I was not expecting what all was in this. Now, they only made one season, which I assume tells the story of the novel, so I don't know why. Maybe they thought there would be multiple seasons if it was a big hit. I never even heard of this, which is odd because I follow a lot of spy story fiction. But those of you in this audience who enjoy this type of material, you got to watch this one. Because John le Carré tells us a lot in this. And by the way, I don't even know of any other spy stories about Mossad teams. That's very rare. Now, there have been more of these Mossad team movies of recent time. So, what's the chick from National Treasure? Who's Nicolas Cage's wife in National Treasure? I just went blank. Krugman. Diane Krugman. Okay, she's in a recent movie about Mossad. Helen Mirren was in a recent movie about Mossad. And then Gal Gadot is in a movie about Mossad, which that makes perfect sense because, I mean, she was in IDF. Yes, obviously Munich. Now, what's interesting is that le Carré's Little Drummer Girl takes place a few years after Munich. And this is a Mossad team that wants revenge for the Munich event. So Michael Shannon plays the Mossad team handler. Skarsgård is the Raven. They recruit Florence Pugh, who's an actress. So how did I... And by the way, the point of the novel is terror is theater. And how did I not hear about this? I'm like, how did I not know about this presentation? Anyway, so we're going to do coverage of this. I took, I think, 3 pages of notes. I watched the entire series. It's not actually that long. It's more like a mini series. It's not a TV show. It's like 5 or 6 episodes or something. Anyway, wow. This was like very revelatory. And this version of it is excellent. It's an AMC did it. So I think what I need to do is maybe we should just do an episode on Mossad spy shows or something, because we haven't done that. And I don't know if, I guess there's enough in this one to do a whole podcast on this if you wanted to, because it gets pretty deep into the Israel-Gaza conflict. In fact, at one point, Skarsgård's character even says the British mandate caused all of this. That's exactly what I said in my Quigley analysis. And let's see, what's that Gal Gadot spy movie? I can't remember the name of it. I think it's this one. Heart of Stone. I think this is it. Yeah, pretty sure that's it. By the way, she looks so much like Jamie. It's crazy. Jamie, are you a Mossad agent? Are you a Mossad agent? You look like Gal Gadot. I assume this is a Mossad story. I don't even know what this is about. She plays Rachel Stone, the only intelligence operative who stands between her global peacekeeping organization and the loss of everything valuable, the asset codename Heart. Okay, I don't, that might just be a generic spy story anyway. Let's see. So the reason this is another reason the original point of what I'm talking about here is fascinating is that this deals with the history of the PLO. And we have not actually delved much into the PLO and their history and all of this. And I'm assuming that is the predecessor to what's going on pre-Hamas, right? So before we had Hamas created in the 70s, I think, by Israel, by the way, we had the PLO. And the way they presented PLO in this is pretty wild. I mean, this was an excellent series, is what I'm trying to say. But I wanted to remember exactly when he wrote this novel, because I thought this was a more recent novel. No, it turns out he wrote this in 1983. And by the way, I mean, you could you could just read these Le Carre novels and pretty much figure out how the world really works. That's what's blowing me away. And by the way, I'm not saying Le Carre is like a beige trad dude. He's not. In many ways, he's a contradictory figure. And probably many people from the espionage world are going to be contradictory figures. But why is he a contradictory figure? Well, because he has this bizarre, and maybe it's because he's like, is he a boomer or like a little old? He's like an older boomer, right? He's more like he's like the edge of boomer and Greatest Generation. So maybe it's because Le Carre has this fixation on democracy, right? So it's like he's got this fixation on democracy, which clouds his vision on a lot of areas. And then he turns around and gets a whole bunch of other things correct. So, when we watch a lot of these movies that are based on Le Carre stories, they're very revelatory. The Orson Welles one, right? The Spy Who Came In From the Cold. Very revelatory about Cold War dialectics. The last Philip Seymour Hoffman movie with Rachel McAdams. What's it called? A Something Man? I just went blank. Also very revelatory. I'm trying to remember that. I never remember that. Which means it's not a very well named movie. If I can never remember the name of that spy movie. Most Wanted Man. That is also a Le Carre story. Under my umbrella, Ella, So remember, if you want movies that actually reveal how the world really works from the spy domain, I mean, yes, kind of James Bond, but those are kind of silly too. But this one is real, okay? And also, it turns out, Little Drummer Girl, which somehow I totally missed. But that makes me think that pretty much all of Le Carre's stories are going to be revelatory. Anyway, so we should do like a Mossad edition where we take some of these Mossad stories, because there's not actually a whole lot of these. But let's see. Fool's Hope, $1. How do you react to the claim of Marxists that conscious man is finite and a material phenomenological product of the senses? Well, I mean, I think we have plenty of materialist critiques on this channel, so you could search and try to find some of those. But I mean, it's a self-refuting thing that you'd be the determinist fallacy, the naturalist fallacy, that if man is merely a determined emergent property of matter, which, by the way, emergentism is actually intended to refute materialism, which is ironic because people like Matt Dillahunty, this is something FDA pointed out, people like Matt Dillahunty don't even know that emergentism is a refutation of materialism and physicalism, and he tries to use emergentism as his position about consciousness, which is dumb. But I mean, it's self-refuting. If matter is a purely determined phenomena of causal chain, as we saw with the novel, then you could never know it, because you're not knowing or learning any truth or any true things. You're actually just discovering what you think is a discovery is just a determined chemical process. So there is no true or false. There's just what is. Adriel Ayano, $5. I was debating with my friend. He says that time is infinite. Well, I don't know. How do you know that, right? How would you prove or demonstrate that time is infinite? So I would first of all ask him how he knows that and how he proves that. All material possibilities have already happened and will continue to happen forever. Okay, these are giant metaphysical leaps. Okay, so he's making all these vast metaphysical claims. So the first thing you want to do in critiquing this person is to say, oh, whoa, dude. First of all, how do you know that? What does that even mean? How do you demonstrate that? These are giant leaps. He says energy takes the path of least resistance. So all seemingly transcendental laws of the universe are energy paths taking. Again, this is all. You're letting him have too much. Like, he doesn't know any of that. He needs to justify these claims. These are just assertions, like grand metaphysical assertions. So call him back to the basics of how do you know any of these claims? How do you know anything at all? First, explain to me how you can have knowledge at all. Then we can talk about your magical fairy stories of scientism, metaphysics here that you have. Anyway, thank you guys. Be sure also to support FDA if you are so inclined. If you're a coffee drinker, and there is the Lore Coffee link in the show description. That's a awesome Orthodox company that puts out really good coffee, high quality coffee, and you can get that coffee there at the link in the show description for Lore Coffee. Otherwise, everybody have a great night.